Imagine, it is the middle of the 20th century, right? World War II is just raging.
Yeah, completely consuming the globe.
But there are no Indian troops fighting for the Allies in the deserts of North Africa.
Not at all.
In fact, Britain is merely this, like, struggling mid-tier European nation just trying to hold its own borders.
Right.
Meanwhile, the wealthiest, most technologically advanced continent on Earth is Asia.
It is a complete reversal of what we know.
It really is. So for those of you listening, if you are the kind of learner who loves that, that aha moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you want to gain a thorough understanding of how our modern world was built, but without, drowning in a textbook, this deep dive is custom built for you.
It really is.
Because today we are pulling one massive historical boulder out of the pond and just watching the ripples completely rewrite the modern world.
Yeah, so today we are looking at this mind-bending alternate history script. It's titled Unconquered, an alternate history of independent India.
Such a cool concept.
It is, and it asks a really fundamental question about the architecture of global power. Basically, what if the British Empire never gained control over the Indian subcontinent?
Okay, let's unpack this because we are establishing a baseline reality here with no British East India Company ruling.
Right.
No British Raj, no 1947 partition, and no English as the dominant global second language.
Exactly, which is huge.
But before we get to the 20th century, we really have to pinpoint the exact moment the timeline actually splits.
Yes, the divergence point.
Right, because it hinges on one specific event in the year 1757.
The Battle of Plassey.
Exactly.
So in our actual historical timeline, this is the battle where the British East India Company defeats the Nawab of Bengal.
Right, it's their crucial foothold.
Exactly. It's the beginning of the end. But in this alternate script, we flip the coin.
I love this.
The Nawab of Bengal actually wins. The British forces are entirely expelled.
And for context here, Bengal at this time isn't just some sprawling farming province.
No, not at all.
It is an economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a region that was arguably one of the wealthiest on the entire planet.
Generating more industrial output in textiles and shipbuilding than most of Europe combined.
Yeah. So the East India Company losing Bengal isn't just a military defeat.
Right.
It is an absolute catastrophic loss of capital.
Which forces a massive geopolitical pivot.
Because they just can't afford it anymore.
Exactly. Britain looks at the military defeat, they tally up the staggering financial costs, and they decide that conquering the subcontinent is simply too expensive and too risky.
Wow.
So they abandon the idea of an Indian empire entirely, and instead they focus their imperial ambitions purely toward North America, Africa, and the Caribbean.
But they don't just go home empty-handed. They double down on the Americas.
Yeah, they have to make up the margins somewhere.
Which means India's survival directly turns up the heat on the American colonies. It fundamentally alters the pressure cooker of the American Revolution.
It really does. Everything is connected.
But focusing purely on the subcontinent for a second. If the British just pack up and leave in 1757, what actually fills that void?
That is a great question.
Because my immediate thought is that India just becomes the nation state of India, just a century and a half earlier.
Right, and that is actually the first major assumption the source material dismantles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, without British conquest, India does not become one unified single country with a centralized government in Delhi.
Okay, so think of it less like a single nation and more like the Holy Roman Empire, or even modern Europe.
Yes, exactly like Europe. You have a landscape of several incredibly powerful, coexisting kingdoms and empires.
Okay, so who are the major players here?
Well, we are talking about really sophisticated entities. You've got the Maratha Confederacy, which was this massive decentralized military alliance.
Okay.
You've got the Mysore Kingdom in the south, the Sikh Empire in the northwest.
Right.
Alongside the Hyderabad state, a very wealthy Bengal, and various Rajput kingdoms.
Wait, if these kingdoms are acting like the states of pre-unification Europe, they need massive militaries to defend their borders.
Absolutely.
So how are they paying for this without just draining their own economies?
Yeah.
Because if you look at Europe during that same period, I mean, they were fighting constantly and bankrupting themselves in the process.
Right. Well, they do fight occasional wars, definitely. But they also develop complex, highly lucrative political systems to sustain themselves.
Oh.
Some evolve into constitutional monarchies, while others remain traditional kingdoms. And despite the military friction, cross-border trade actually flourishes.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is how this proves that the concept of India as a single administrative unit was largely a colonial construct. A regional state model was a completely viable alternative.
Which naturally leads us to the wealth.
Yes, the money.
Because in our timeline, Britain extracted an unimaginable amount of wealth from India over 2 centuries.
Trillions of dollars in today's money.
Right. So when that capital stays home, the economic trajectory just changes overnight.
Entirely. There is no colonial economic drain.
Yeah.
Indian industries, which were already highly advanced, they just continue to grow on their own terms.
So instead of raw cotton and silk being shipped to British factories in Lancashire to fuel the British Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. Indian merchants expand their own manufacturing base.
That makes total sense.
Cities like Surat on the west coast, Murshidabad in the east, and Mysore in the south, they grow into major global financial centers.
And they aren't operating in a vacuum, right? Like, instead of being a captive monopolized market for Britain, the rulers of these Indian kingdoms orchestrate their own industrialization by looking outward.
Yes, they are highly proactive.
They start inviting engineers and experts from France, Germany, and Japan to help build infrastructure.
Right, they build large steel mills decades earlier than they did in our timeline.
Wow.
They are exporting finished products to the world, not just raw materials.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because we are always taught that the British built the railways in India.
Oh, the classic railway argument.
Right. It's often cited as the great infrastructure legacy of the Raj. So without the British, isn't this booming economy kind of stuck moving goods on dirt roads and rivers?
Well, we have to look at the underlying logic of those British railways.
Okay.
In our timeline, the British built the Indian railway system using a broad gauge network designed primarily for 2 reasons.
Which were?
First, rushing troops to the interior to put down rebellions. And second, moving raw materials out of the interior straight to the ports of Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras for export.
Ah, so the tracks literally bypassed local manufacturing hubs.
Exactly. They weren't built to connect Indian businesses to each other.
Oh, wow. So it was basically just a one-way extraction funnel to the boats.
That is exactly what it was. But in the alternate timeline, these wealthy industrializing kingdoms quickly realize the immense economic value of trains for their own domestic trade.
So they build them themselves.
Yes, different regions build their own separate railway systems. And eventually, just as we saw in Europe, those individual networks link up through international trade agreements.
That's amazing.
The railway map develops organically, connecting internal city to internal city, based on local economic needs rather than colonial extraction routes.
You know, it's like an operating system. If you don't force a foreign language onto a population to manage that infrastructure, you aren't just changing the words they use.
Right.
You're preserving their entire intellectual supply chain. Like, an ancient university doesn't have to start over in English. It just upgrades its existing knowledge.
The cultural butterfly effect here is massive.
I bet.
Because the British don't rule, English never becomes the common administrative second language.
It's relegated purely to international trade.
Exactly. The regional languages flourish in government and higher education. Hindi expands in the north. Bengali remains an intellectual powerhouse in the east.
Yeah.
Tamil dominates the south, and you have vibrant official spheres for Marathi, Punjabi, Gujarati, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, and Urdu.
And when a government operates in the language its people actually speak, it completely democratizes commerce.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have a small, English-speaking elite holding all the administrative power. Local merchants and everyday citizens can easily interact with the state, the courts, and the banks.
Which rapidly accelerates local business. And it also fundamentally alters the education system. Well, without British educational policies overriding the existing structures, ancient centers of learning naturally evolve into modern universities.
Oh, that makes sense.
The sources describe an incredible blend where scientific education combines ancient Indian mathematics, astronomy, and medicine with modern European science.
Wow, so India develops a totally unique technological identity rather than just importing a Western curriculum.
Precisely.
Now, that also applies to how society is organized, right?
Yep.
Though we should be clear for you listening, we know from the sources that this isn't a utopia.
Right. No place is perfect.
Perfect communal harmony isn't guaranteed, as religious and regional conflicts existed long before colonialism.
Absolutely. But what is absent are the rigid British colonial policies.
Like the census.
Yes. In our timeline, The British census of 1881 forced people into rigid religious categories for the first time. It institutionalized those divides for patronage and administrative control.
The whole divide and rule strategy.
Exactly. So the large-scale divisions that actively sparked and intensified later communal tensions, they just don't develop in the same way. Identities remain more fluid and overlapping.
Which means the daily culture and entertainment look totally different, too. I actually love this detail from the script. Bollywood, as we know it, probably doesn't exist.
Yeah, that blew my mind.
Because there isn't a centralized, unified national identity speaking a single commercial language, so regional film industries dominate entirely.
Right, the cultural output is completely decentralized.
And sports completely flip. Cricket remains a minor, obscure foreign sport.
Which is hard to even picture today.
I know.
Instead, indigenous sports like kabaddi, wrestling, and polo become globally famous exports with multi-billion-dollar international leagues.
That is so cool.
And if they import a popular sport from Europe, it's almost certainly going to be football.
But, this cultural independence brings up a staggering realization.
What's that?
If there is no British oppression, what happens to the historical titans we associate with the freedom struggle? What happens to Mahatma Gandhi?
Oh, this is a huge one. Without British colonial rule, there is no Indian independence movement against Britain.
Right.
Therefore, Mahatma Gandhi doesn't lead a freedom struggle.
That is wild to think about.
He likely still becomes a lawyer. He might become a prominent social reformer within his region of Gujarat or, a respected philosopher.
Sure.
But he does not become the global icon of resisting an empire.
Think about the civil rights history you learned in school, right? Martin Luther King Jr. heavily modeled his strategies in the American South on Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance.
Yes, he did.
Nelson Mandela studied those same tactics in South Africa. If the British never conquer India, Gandhi never develops that global platform. The civil rights movements, today lose their primary blueprint.
It's incredible.
The absence of one man's global fame literally alters the trajectory of human rights worldwide.
It illustrates the immense interconnected weight of these historical turning points.
So what does this all mean for the other side of the equation? We've talked about how India flourishes. Let's flip the lens.
Okay, looking at Europe.
Right, what happens to the country that didn't get to extract all that wealth?
Britain's trajectory takes a massive hit.
I would imagine so.
Without the wealth of India funding their global expansion, their domestic economy grows much more slowly. They become a major European power, similar to France or Germany, but they profoundly struggle to maintain a global empire.
Because they just don't have the cash flow.
Exactly. Without the economic anchor of the subcontinent, the British Empire as a worldwide hegemon is severely weakened.
Which fundamentally changes the 20th century's biggest conflicts. Think about the logistics of the world wars.
Oh, this is where it gets really dark for Britain.
In our timeline, millions of Indian soldiers fought for Britain in both World War I and World War II.
Millions.
They provided the manpower and the regional supply lines that kept the Allies afloat.
And in this alternate timeline, those millions of soldiers simply aren't there. Britain is fighting with far fewer troops.
Wow.
Campaigns in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in Burma become exponentially harder for the Allies.
Like protecting the Suez Canal.
Yes. Protecting the Suez Canal without Indian regiments holding the line changes the entire North African campaign against Rommel.
That is a terrifying thought for the Allies.
The logistical and manpower strain on Britain would be immense. The sources suggest these wars would likely last much longer, and the borders drawn at the end of them could look completely different.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire 20th century shifts its center of gravity.
It really does.
While Europe is exhausting itself in longer, harder wars without those colonial subsidies, an independent, wealthy, uncolonized India is industrializing right alongside Japan and China.
Exactly. The global balance of power tips eastward far earlier.
Yeah.
Asia becomes the world's economic center decades, maybe a full century, sooner than it did in our reality.
That is wild.
The anchor of global trade shifts away from the Atlantic and moves straight to the Indian Ocean. European colonial dominance worldwide weakens incredibly fast because the financial engine that funded it—
The British Empire's wealth from India.
Exactly. It simply doesn't exist to set the standard.
Okay, let's fast forward to right now, the year 2026.
Okay, modern day.
If we trace this alternate timeline all the way to today, what does South Asia actually look like?
Well, the script lays out a few realistic modern scenarios. Today, South Asia might be a united federal superpower.
Like a massive wealthy nation of nearly 2 billion people.
Right. Or, perhaps more likely, given the European analogy we used earlier, it's a block of prosperous independent nations cooperating closely, much like the European Union.
Okay, I can see that.
Crucially, though, countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh might never exist at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, because there is no British-designed partition in 1947, no hasty drawing of borders by a retreating empire.
Oh, that makes sense.
Those regions might just be independent states within this larger EU-style framework.
You know, I have a hard time buying that this is a total utopia, though.
Oh, it absolutely isn't.
We are talking about a massive amount of wealth sitting right in the middle of the globe. If the British aren't there and these kingdoms are acting like Europe, wouldn't someone else just try to conquer them?
Right.
Or wouldn't they just tear each other apart?
This raises an important question, and the sources dedicate significant time to these realistic downsides.
Because history is never that clean.
History rarely offers perfect alternatives, and a region with that much wealth and fragmentation carries massive risks. First, the political fragmentation.
The European-style model.
Yes, that model means regional wars could have been frequent and devastating. We could be looking at a Maratha-Mysore conflict that rivals the Napoleonic Wars in terms of casualties and continental destruction.
And industrialization wouldn't be equal either, right?
Precisely. You might see extreme industrial disparities.
Look what.
A kingdom like Bengal might look like 20th century Germany, highly industrialized and wealthy, while a neighboring state remains completely agrarian and impoverished, leading to massive internal refugee crises and border skirmishes.
And then there's the threat of other empires.
Yeah.
Just because Britain decided it was too expensive doesn't mean the rest of Europe ignores the most lucrative trade routes on Earth.
Exactly. France would absolutely attempt to exploit the divisions, perhaps aggressively funding the Hyderabad state to fight proxy wars against British allies. Portugal might try to expand its footprint beyond Goa. Later on, the Russian Empire, pushing down through Afghanistan during the Great Game.
Oh, well, right.
They might have attempted to annex the Sikh Empire or the northern Rajput kingdoms.
So it's just a different flavor of imperialism.
Yes, we would likely see foreign powers carving out spheres of influence rather than total domination.
Plus, without the unifying force of a shared anti-colonial struggle, developing a true unified national identity across such a diverse subcontinent would take much, much longer.
Oh, definitely.
Because the shared trauma of British rule and the collective fight for independence forged the modern Indian identity. Without it, you might have deeply entrenched regional nationalisms that just refuse to cooperate, halting continental progress for decades.
It is a profound trade-off.
Yeah.
Certain things improve drastically through uninterrupted local development and retaining their own capital, but the geopolitics become far more volatile due to competing local ambitions and the constant threat of foreign incursions. It's not a perfect world, but it is a profoundly different architecture of power.
For you listening, this is exactly why looking at history through the lens of what didn't happen is one of the most powerful ways to understand why the world looks the way it does today.
I completely agree.
It strips away that illusion of inevitability. We see that the current global economic balance, the borders on our maps, the length of the world wars, and even the strategies of the American Civil Rights Movement aren't laws of physics.
No, they aren't.
They are just the fragile results of very specific historical events.
It forces us to question the permanence of our reality.
Which leaves us with this final thought. If the entire economic center of the globe, the global dominance of the English language, and the fate of empires could all hinge on the outcome of one 18th century battle in Bengal.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, let me rephrase that. If all of that hinges on just one battle, what seemingly permanent, unshakable facts of life in our modern world right now are actually just the fragile results of a single historical coin toss.
Are the institutions we trust today truly permanent? Or just the temporary ripples of a boulder dropped a century ago?
Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.